Vladimir Putin and the US president-elect have held their first telephone conversation. RT's correspondent Gayana Chichikan joins me live from Washington with the latest details. Gayana, throughout the presidential race, Donald Trump, he was talking at great length about how the US and Russia should join forces, perhaps to fight international terrorism. So now he's spoken with President Putin. Do you think Trump will come good on his pledge?
Well, I certainly don't know. I would love to be a fly on the wall during that phone conversation. What we have is a readout of the phone call from the Russian president's press office. And the readout says Vladimir Putin once again congratulated Donald Trump with his victory in the presidential election, expressed Russia's willingness to be a partner to the United States based on mutual respect and, quote unquote, non-interference in each other's internal affairs. Both agreed that these are difficult times for U.S.-Russia relations, and both expressed willingness to work together to normalize the relations. According to the readout of the phone conversation, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin also agreed on the importance of joining forces to fight terrorism, which could lead to the U.S. and Russia forming a united front in Syria. Throughout the presidential race, the Washington establishment and much of the media blasted Donald Trump for saying that he would get along with the Russian president. His friendly position on Russia, very much in contrast to Hillary Clinton's, has raised, among other things, questions about the role of NATO moving forward. At a news conference this Monday, President Obama said in his final days in office he would travel to NATO allies to assure them that they have nothing to worry about. Here.
In my conversation with the president-elect, he expressed a great interest in maintaining our core strategic relationships. And so one of the messages I will be able to deliver is his commitment to NATO and the transatlantic alliance. I think that's one of the most important functions I can serve at this stage during this trip, is to let them know that there is no weakening of resolve when it comes to America's commitment to maintaining a strong and robust NATO relationship.
Almost nobody expected Donald Trump to win the election, and everybody was bracing for a continuation or even worsening of very frosty relations between the U.S. and Russia under Hillary Clinton. With Donald Trump in office, it seems there is hope, specifically when it comes to U.S.-Russia relations, although it is too early to tell. Donald Trump hasn't been sworn into office yet. We have yet to see whether, the sanctions the U.S. imposed on Russia related to Ukraine will stay in place. Mr. Trump hasn't really weighed in on that yet. These past few years have done a lot of damage to U.S.-Russia relations, with both governments blaming each other for that.
Well, Gayana, we certainly have to wait and see whether he's able to go forward with those relationships. Thanks for giving us an update on that. To discuss this further now, let's cross live to Michael Hughes, a journalist and foreign policy strategist. Michael, thanks very much for joining us here on RT. Now, we've heard Donald Trump say that more cooperation is needed between the US and Russia when it comes particularly to fighting international terrorism. Now that he's been elected, will he be able to do this? Is he going to be able to bring Washington and Moscow closer together?
I think he's going to try, and I think it's a good first step, this phone call. But I think the million-dollar question is the people he's going to have around him, the advisors. Is his agenda going to be undermined by them? That's the question. I think Trump on his own, I think his ideas are pretty good about cementing relations with Russia. But some of the advisors, like a Defense Secretary Bolton, that'd be pretty troubling. So the question is, it looks like he's going to be surrounded by neoconservatives, but that doesn't mean he has to listen to them. So we have to, as someone else said, it's too early to tell. Let's see who he appoints, Defense Secretary and senior national security advisors. And he does have a lack of foreign policy experience, so that makes it even more concerning about who's going to be whispering in his ear on how to treat NATO, how to treat Russia. So wait-and-see attitude is really all we can do. overall.
The truth is, Michael, you know, we've seen a long campaign. We've seen him almost hold an olive branch and saying that he wants to work with Russia, but he's not a lone ranger, is he? He does need the support of Congress to make any significant changes. And that's the question, I suppose. How likely is it that Congress will put a lid on his plans if he's suggesting closer ties with Russia?
I think that's the other problem, too. As much as Hillary Clinton was horrible for Russian relations, Barack Obama was not very good for Russian relations, but that doesn't mean the Republicans are any good, en masse are any good for Russian relations. I think Donald Trump is this unique figure that defies both parties. So, yeah, the GOP in Congress, I mean, let's face it, you haven't heard, you know, Russian-friendly rhetoric out of them. Everyone from the Speaker of the House all the way down to every member of House and Senate. There just aren't a lot of, you know, there's a random voice like Congressman Rohrabacher, for example, is a positive within the Republican Party, but he's in the minority. You know, we have to be frank about that. So that is worrying, the makeup of Congress. They could, most Republicans in Congress are pro-NATO, for example. And what's their situation going to be like in Syria? A lot of Republicans want more involvement, more aid. You know, if you look at Senator McCain, for example, let's aid the rebels more, which is, you know, a disaster, a recipe for disaster. So those are the type of things that are going to be really, really important to look early on to see if, you know, Trump can probably implement the foreign policy decisions, but sometimes when it comes down to the cost, is Congress going to fund certain things that he needs? I think that there you get into a little trouble. So.
Michael, do you think it's just down to the cost, though? It's not just the cost, is it, Michael? It's the fact that he needs this mass support behind him in order to follow through
right.
good relations. And surely he's going to come up against a brick wall at some point.
Sure, you know, aside from cost, if he takes an approach of removing sanctions from Russia or withdrawing or working with Russia very closely on helping Assad, for example. Republicans in the House and Senate, they could go on a smear campaign, and they can sway public support where Trump would have no other choice. But from a political perspective, even though he could technically implement some of the foreign policy, but it would politically be, you know, like suicide for him to do certain things if the, you know, Republicans were able to mobilize this entire public opinion against him. So. It's almost Trump, you know, maybe he has to build a coalition of the outside voices that can stand up to his pro-Russian policies. People like, you know, if there was a Ron Paul left in the Congress, or, you know, on both sides, maybe a Bernie Sanders can align with them. But his work is cut off from him in that regard. You're right. I mean, how does he convince these Republicans to see the light? That is the question.
Well, I suppose, Michael,
like President Obama has seen the light. Yeah.
I suppose, Michael, he's managed to convince the masses. Maybe he has the power to convince those behind him. We're going to have to stop there, Michael. It's been great to talk to you. Journalist and foreign policy strategist, thanks for joining us here on RT International.